Welcome to another episode of Ranting and Raving. Welcome to another episode of Ranting and Raving. This is Brian. I'm again joined by Bijon. We're going to have a little fun today since the Saints have finally, at long last, fell back ashwards into what seems like a pretty good coaching hire with Kellen Moore. By the way, Gail, it's Kellen with a K. You know, Gail, you love Ks. You prefer the three of them in a row. You also love to
Off the
support
bat, huh? Off the bat.
we're coming in. We're coming in. Like just a little shot off the top. You know, she loves those. She loves supporting people who maybe need some help with PR. So you'd think she might have been told, get the name right of your new coach. Regardless, we're gonna have a little fun today. We're gonna take a look at our favorite quotes from the presser, kind of what our thoughts are on them. Kind of where it puts us just on these initial impressions. And then kind of where we think the team is going to go from here. So with my obligatory shot around Kellen Moore out of the way, I'm going to start it with the elephant in the room, mostly just so we can get the elephant out of the way because there's far more interesting things to talk about. So Kellen was asked about Derek Carr. He's actually asked about him a couple of times. And look, all pressers, especially like introductory pressers, there's always going to be evasive answers. Like these guys go through media training. You literally learn how to say a bunch of words that mean nothing. However, within that nothing, you actually can glean a good amount, whether it's from tone, whether from body language, or word choice. So Kellen said that Derek Carr, although really by quarterback play level, they're about the same. He said that he's a fantastic starter, long-time starter in this league, great career. What Kellen is doing is he's intentionally highlighting the player because you cannot come in as a new coach, coming brand new into a locker room and have your first thing be, that guy sucks. Whether it's true or not, whether he went and told Mickey, hey, I'm not signing if you can't get rid of him. I have coached multiple top 10 offenses the last decade, and I have no interest in being a bottom five with this bum. Or, paraphrasing whatever he actually said. That's all great, but you can't come into an introductory press conference like that. Even Sean Payton, known firebrand Sean Payton, didn't do that when he came into Denver. You go look at what Sean had to say. It was a lot of the same type of stuff. Now, Sean had some heat for Hackett, but Sean was also giving Hackett heat while he was at Fox Sports. So Sean was just kind of carrying on what he had already started there. But he didn't come after the players because these are people who understand how to lead a locker room. And this is going to be a recurring theme for me, but something really important that I do actually genuinely want people to understand here, because Kellen Moore was not just a college quarterback. He is the winningest college quarterback ever. Kellen Moore understands how a locker room works. Don't let the buck teeth and the nerdy face fool you. Kellen is not some doughy, wishy-washy, got a cut couch in his office guy like the last occupant of that position. This is someone who really understands how to lead a locker room. He's done it pretty much his entire life. Kellen is not stupid enough to walk in and go, yeah, your quarterback sucks. People who I've never met before. And that's really all the press conference was. He said a bunch of fluff about Carr. He really didn't say much about him, what he likes, what he's excited about as a player, none of those other things. And there's a reason for that. And I'll just tee you up here real nicely. There's some other people he had some stuff to say about that took a little bit of a different tone. Bijon, why don't you tell me about it?
Yeah, so obviously, like Brian said, so we're each taking our best quotes. And like Brian said on the Derek Carr thing, and also just the overall feel of the presser. Like, usually with these pressers, because Brian and I have watched football for a while, we've seen our share of these. Like, the best, it's a success if you come out of the presser and there are like no headlines about it. That's like what it is. Like, yes, you'll have like the Dan Campbell's like biting kneecaps and stuff, but like you kind of just want to keep it down the middle. And like, especially like and he's a first-time head coach. So it's like, he doesn't want to incite anything when he just like he's already late trying to build this thing, right? Because he had just won the Super Bowl and what have you. So that's where, like, yeah, the Derek Carr stuff, it's been reported on a couple other podcasts, like Saints Block Party, reported, or like, sources have said basically like Derek Carr was not being there was a non-negotiable for Kellen taking this job. So that is out there, and so yeah, with that, yeah, his answers about Carr were very just down the middle and like no room for follow-up questions. Great career. He is a starter. I think the funny one was the second time they asked, like, with Derek Carr as your week 1 starter, and he said, I think Derek Carr is a starter, but he didn't say my starter.
And I'm looking forward to going through this process with him, just like everybody else.
Just like everybody else. But yeah, so
I'm not giving y'all shit.
Yeah. But the other quotes, so I chose 2 quotes as my first one, so I kind of cheated. But basically, the only other 2 players mentioned in the presser were Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill. So with the Alvin Kamara, they asked him, basically, the context of the question was he just got done coaching Saquon Barkley, who went for 2,000. Do you see being able to replicate something like that with Alvin Kamara, and what have you? Maybe not 2,000 yards, but, is Alvin Kamara that type of back for you? He said, I have tons of respect for Alvin as a player, obviously one of the premier players in our league. His ability to play in the passing game and the run game and all the versatile roles he can play. A lot of people a long time have been looking to see how they can find the next Alvin Kamara. He will continue to be an important piece. So that, like, and then we'll go to the Taysom. They asked him also about the Taysom one. They said, have you ever seen a player like Taysom Hill? If you watch it, the minute that Taysom comes out, all those teeth, we see all 57
those
of them
teeth
come, all those teeth. He basically said, same type of piece, quote, same type of piece. A lot of us have been chasing Taysom Hills for a long time, but obviously there is only one Taysom Hill, and that is important for everyone to recognize. So, like, the quotes for Derek Carr are, he's a good starter. He's great. We'll figure it out. With Alvin, he's going to be an important piece. Here are some of his strengths and weaknesses. Everybody's trying to replicate an Alvin Kamara. So you see that it's subtle language.
No one's trying to replicate Derek Carr.
Right. So that's where it's like, it's subtle language where neither is going to like raise an eyebrow, but you see how he talks about these 2 players versus how he talks about Derek Carr. Now, in the context of the Alvin Kamara thing, I think that one was interesting because, like, Saquon Barkley, he went for 2,000 yards, and obviously he was like bell cow, close to 300 carries and all that. Like, at this stage in their careers, like, Saquon Barkley is a better back than Alvin Kamara. Like, I love Alvin, but like, I think that's pretty definitive. So the fact that he still sees that, because like me personally, I wouldn't use Alvin the way that he used Saquon Barkley. I wouldn't be giving him 20 carries. I would actually try to be paring him back a little bit and doing other stuff. But the fact that he kind of sees Alvin in that same light, that same conversation as Saquon Barkley was a lot.
He still sees him as a chess piece.
Yeah, because like he could very easily say in that, without raising eyebrows, he could very easily say, Saquon was great this past year, big piece to our Super Bowl puzzle. Alvin's a different type of back that, like, he's obviously great, but like, they're fundamentally different backs. You could say things like that without offending anyone, but no, he kept it where like Alvin is here, important piece. And then with the Taysom one, that becomes interesting because, like, I guess, like, so going into this offseason, Taysom Hill is set to make $10 million. It's kind of a lot for a 35-year-old coming off of an injury. So we don't know whether he's going to be back. And if he's not back, it's like purely financial reasons. So we'll see about that, of whether he takes a pay cut. But it does tell me something that if Taysom is back, like, Kellen is, like, I think, ready to use him. I think he is ready to use him in some way or another. And like, at this point now, like, with Taysom, people got to put respect on Taysom's name, man. Like, he's done it with Sean. Obviously, Sean brought him in. And then after that, when Pete was OC, he didn't do a lot well, but he used Taysom. Clint had his limitations, but he used Taysom.
Only time Clint looked great was when he had Taysom.
And then now Kellen has Taysom. So Taysom is like a piece, and can be something. Like, for me, I know it's crazy, but like, emotionally, I want to bring him back at the 10 million number. I do not care. Like, this season's going to be a rough rebuilding one. Make it fun. Bring him back. Bring guy back.
My Viking Mormon.
Yeah, bring him back. I don't want to see him in another uniform. Like, that's just me,
And we all know if he gets cut, if he plays football this year and it's not in New Orleans, there's only one place he's going to play. We all know
one place he's going to go. He might go to Seattle. Clint is in Seattle. I will put that one out there.
No, he's going Sean over Clint.
Clint is in Seattle, and he single-handedly beat Seattle once, so they know who Taysom is.
He beat Cleveland too.
Yeah, exactly. So but
let it not be forgotten that Taysom Hill was the second best quarterback in that game, and Jameis Winston was first.
Yeah,
the Saints won by a lot because Taysom Hill with the fourth quarter went, nah, fuck this, game's over.
Yeah, but yeah, so that was my first quote about it. So a lot of stuff about players, but I'll let you jump into the next quote you got.
So the next thing that I thought was really noteworthy from the press conference was because they asked him, obviously about the history here, Drew, Sean, continuing what they built, and we're just gonna skip the guy in the middle who tried to tear it all down. The part of that I found, or of the response that I found interesting, was him mentioning that when he first came into the league, he was in Detroit. And Lombardi basically was implementing a version of Sean's system there. He's very familiar with it. And by the way, just if anybody's listening to this, and there's a few because he left us, which I get, but because he left us, all of a sudden Sean Payton doesn't get credit for all the things he did. Most modern offenses in the NFL, especially the good passing games, use a lot of Sean's concepts and Sean built on other people. Built on. And Walsh took stuff from Gruden, took stuff from other people, and then he has his own, gumbo in there. But it was actually interesting for me to see him specifically bring that up. And here's the reason why. We saw emphatically this year that he understands not just, give the ball to the stud running back, but how to put that running back in a position to succeed, how to call an effective running game, because those aren't the same thing. It's not just hey, run up the A gap 47 times a game, or I don't know, toss right over and over and over for no reason. There is a way, there's a methodology to calling a successful run game. He's proven he can do that. One of my biggest frustrations with Clint all year, not the first 2 weeks, because the first 2 weeks don't count because the run game was so dominant. It was dominant run game and bombs. So yeah, it was football porn. But every week after that, one of the hallmarks of Peyton's offense is not only that he creates a lot of 3-layer routes or 3-level routes where not necessarily, sometimes it will be the whole width and breadth of the league, of the field, but a lot of times he's actually stacking reads on top of each other to make it easy for the quarterback to process and see where should I go and quickly make a decision and get the ball there so you can get the ball in people's hands in space, create first downs, keep the chains moving, et cetera, et cetera. Clint had none of that. Clint had no answers for the blitz. And Kellen not only has shown, again, as a play caller, but just philosophically coming from arguably the best offense of the last 20 years of doing those specific things, that being his origin point in the NFL, that actually is valuable to me. I'm not one of the people that's I don't want anyone who has anything to do with Sean whatsoever, blah, 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 blah. I get it, but it's this is one of the greatest offensive minds ever. I do want people who understand what Sean does and can incorporate it. I just want them to be their own person. And I actually really liked that quote coming out just from this guy understands there's a lot of football out there and fit it to who you perspective.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think especially with the Eagles this year, being in Philly. So I've heard, I've been following Kellen Moore out here and whatnot. A lot of what I think I liked him the most about his offense this particular season was people complain. They're just man, they only run 3 or 4 plays. They only, their passing game, when they were complaining about it, they're it's so simple and rudimentary. They only have whatever. Like Kellen was not Ben Johnson this year in the sense that like Ben Johnson was deep in his bag. Like I'm doing shit with O-linemen and I'm doing whatever. Like he was deep in his bag. Kellen did like we don't know what Kellen's bag is, but he didn't need to go deep into that bag, and that's something I kind of liked a little bit. Where it's like, yeah, he ran 3 to 4 plays really well, like in the run game, like it was like outside zone, this option, whatever. But like they ran them really well, and they ran them really well and repetitively. Because the thing is, the only reason that works is because you do it right over and over and over and over and over again. And those are the hallmarks of great offenses. Yes, like we want to get into our bag and all that, but like the core concepts of being able to go and do it over again, and like every offensive lineman takes the same amount of steps, they're all in sync, and everything, like that is the hallmark of these great offenses. Because like listen, like all these offenses like in the league, like all 32 teams, even the ones where you see that the offense sucks, if you go to practice and watch them do it, like they're hitting everything in practice, but it's hard to like bring all that over to the game.
Remember
like,
Jake Hayner in practice. Oh my God, he looks awesome. Yeah. Then Jake Hayner in the game happens.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but I like that thing on the offense teeing me up again. So the second quote I have is they asked him basically about his offensive kind of philosophy and what have you, and like what he thinks basically, like, are you going to bring the run game over? Are you going to bring there? And he said basically, the biggest thing from an offensive perspective is that you have to stress the defense, the tempo, which we will use a lot of. We will use shifts and motions when we huddle, but we want to stress the defense. Now, whether we throw it 50 times or run it 50 times, I really don't care. We will do that based on who we have available to us. So, and then, so talking about that quote, and then like later in the press conference, which we'll get to like in this part, they asked him about play calling. He just says, "I call plays." Bang. So
full stop. Period at the end.
Full stop. Yeah, like so the running the 50, throwing 50. That's a cool quote, because I mean, like, he's not married to a system. Like, he is malleable as far as like what he has, and like a lot of coaches like want to maybe say stuff like that, but like to be fair, so like I did some sicko stuff and I watched Dennis Allen's intro presser from a few years ago. I watched it at 2x though. I watched it at 2x speed, so it's not like I sat there for 45 minutes. But like when they asked him about the offense, to be fair to Dennis Allen, he's not an offensive coach, but when they asked him about his offense, basically it was, we want to be physical, we want to run the ball, we want to be explosive, and we want to limit negative plays. Everybody wants to do that though. Like being physical is the prerequisite to being a good offense. There has not been an offense or a Super Bowl winning team in the history of football that has not been physical. Like if you're not physical, you're not going anywhere.
You don't want to be physical, go play flag.
Right. So it's just like, so I think I like the fact that like, he acknowledged like, it might be running the ball, it might be throwing the ball. Like, my one concern with the quote though, because I don't want to like, basically, I do want to play devil's advocate. My one concern is like, what is the thing he's going to lean on? Like, it's cool that you want to maybe pass or run, but like all great offenses have some sort of staple. Like, what is the identity of your offense? Like even the great Sean Payton offenses, like when they got into a rut, we had all these screens. Like that's the thing. That's our little baby blanket we always go back to. Whether it's screens for San Francisco, it's these wide zones. Like we always have the thing we can kind of go back to. So like, I just hope like the flexibility doesn't lead to like basically a lack of identity of like what we are. But I do like the fact that he said like, it'll depend on what we have. Considering we've just gone the past 2 years with Mickey and DA saying like, oh, well, injuries, and all these things that limit them, there's that. And then also like, in comparison to DA's presser, because they did ask him about defense, his thing was basically just, and whether he'd tweak personnel philosophy and stuff. He literally said, probably not going to do much. What is not broke, we don't fix. And that was
what you're doing.
Yeah, keep doing what you're doing. And then the I call plays thing. So what was funny about that? So one of the big reasons Kellen hasn't gotten a job, I think, is they say like he doesn't interview great. He's not that rah-rah guy. He's kind of like a nerd and stuff. And like, you know, we are so past that, like as a society, that you need to be rah-rah guy. But like, you know, I get it. It's still football. So the fact that when they asked him though, like, you know, he's giving all these like cordial answers to like most of these questions. And then like, you know, big smile, a lot of these questions. And they asked him about calling plays. And he said, I call plays, period. We move on. So that's where like, I like that because like, okay, he might be meek and stuff, but like that dog that you need in a coach.
That was Boise State Kellen Moore. That was, I'm going to drop 50 on you and smile at you.
Yeah, I'm going to like, he's like, I call plays. Like this is like, I'm running this bitch. You know, like that was huge. In comparison to Dennis Allen, when they asked him about defensive play calling, because he was a DC going to a head coach, they asked him like about play calling. He said, we will definitely talk about it. I see myself doing it. It's hard to kind of turn your baby over, but we'll have a conversation about it. I would like to call plays. So, I mean,
Mickey,
like,
can I please?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like, you know, like, I don't want to like harp on
Mickey,
it, but like, you see the difference. Yeah. Demonetized. Not that we were getting monetized.
Yeah, I got 20 people are going to see this. I'm not worried.
Yeah. But, yeah. So I think like, you know, I do think before I pass it back to Brian for his third quote, like, I do think there is going to be a focus on O-line. Like, I know every team is like, we want to be physical. He mentioned offensive line like 3 or 4 times in there. He said offensive line is the pulse of the team. He said everything is dictated by the offensive line. He talked about the level of investment that we've had in our offensive line. There were just a lot about offensive line. And like, you go back to all the stops he's been at, obviously we know what the Eagles O-line is. That's the best O-line in football. The Chargers have had porous O-lines, but their O-line was actually pretty decent when he was there, you know, before injuries. But like when he got there, you know, they already had Rashawn Slater, who's a premier left tackle. They had Corey Linsley, Zion Johnson at right guard. Like, and so they, you know, had the O-lines. And then the 8 years in the Cowboys, like, we know what those O-lines were with Tyron Smith, Zach Martin, Travis Frederick, and all that. So like whether he can build one on his own, I don't know. But you know it's going to be a priority for him. Like, you lean on your experiences. And he's had the experiences of like these physical mauling type of O-lines. So like I am curious of how it goes, of whether he decides I want to develop it. Like, I've made it pretty vocal in our Discord, in our Saints Block Party Discord, that like I would be livid if we drafted like Will Campbell at 9, because I'm tired of eating vegetables and I'm tired of O-line. But I can see him doing it if that's kind of the way he wants to go about it, and just get even more talent there, and just that's how he wants to start.
I think that the draft would have to go so far outside of what anyone would expect to consider Will Campbell at 9. And we'll probably have like a follow-up just specifically around the draft at some point, but just to the point of O-line being a focus. And this is actually one of the things I'm giving Kellen credit that he hasn't earned yet, but it's because he's shown himself to be smart. So we're going to look back at the Sean comparison really quick. So Kellen isn't Sean. We know Kellen isn't Sean. That's good. But he's a good offensive mind who actually has the ability to adjust his play calling and his scheme to his personnel, which is something that Sean does, which is something what really good coordinators in general can do. Something DA never could. Sean went to Denver. Like, I know a lot of people like remember like, oh, the Broncos were the #1 sack team in the league last year. Maybe what a lot of people don't know, they were also Philly had the best O-line. Denver was like top 3. They weren't top 3 before Sean went there. They didn't go invest a bunch of first-round picks on the offensive line.
Quinn Miners was like a meme or whatever. Like the beer belly meme was Quinn Miners, who was like their right guard. I think from Wisconsin, he has like the pencil mustache, like during the draft, and he was like a joke. But I think he made like an all pro team this year.
Yeah. Like, here's one of the things about offensive line play, and then I'll kind of transition this into kind of the third area for me. But this does get forgotten a lot. And it's part of why, like, again, Kellen bringing it up, I don't consider that a red flag. It's just as far as, like, you know, we had some people in the Discord like, here's my mock draft with 7 interior linemen. And it's like, I get where you're coming from, but this is no, please, for fuck's sake. This is horrible asset management. The thing with offensive line is it is unique among all positions groups in the NFL in that the offensive line is the only true unit. Defensive line can just have an Aaron Donald and work. A secondary can just have an Earl Thomas or an Ed Reed or a Marshawn Lattimore, and the whole thing works. You can have Joe Thomas, who was a god tier offensive lineman in Cleveland, year after year after year after year. You know what else they were doing year after year after year after year? Picking number one, because it's a unit. If the guard next to him stinks, he won't be the problem. You're still going to get pressure from that side. If the center stinks, rinse, repeat. The right guard, the right side, like it's one of those things where it truly is. And you mentioned this earlier, like you need 5 guys in lockstep, same number of steps, same timing, same, like all on the same page, working as a unit. That is where offensive line play comes in. And it's like, that's where my biggest pet peeve of people constantly talking about, well, just draft Will Campbell. Okay, well, 1, you already have a left tackle. 2, your right tackle is fine. He's not great, but he's fine. He was fine most of last year. He's really good in the run game. Let's not forget that. The problems are guard. So you're going to spend a top 10 pick, the single most valuable asset you had, on a guard, and you think that's going to shift the margin of your team, which was closer to a 2-win team than it was to being a 7-win team. That's just bad asset management. And I don't think Kellen is dumb enough to go, oh, well, I'll just get an offensive lineman and that's going to fix everything. He's going to understand there's an okay amount of talent there. We definitely need to work on guard, but this is a unit. I need to coach them to work as a unit and get some weapons so that we don't need them to hold up for 4 seconds. We need them to hold up for 2.5 to 3 like everybody else. Again, we'll probably revisit like in longer form another time, but it's a personal pet peeve when I see folks bring up offensive line like it's D-line or secondary or wide receiver, these other positions. Like, well, just add this one guy. It doesn't work that way. It never has.
Yeah, I would say like on your thing about it being a unit, like also just like one, you look at Kellen's O-lines. He's had more late round guys in his, not that he's drafted them, but like you look at the studs he's had, like he's had his share of first round pick. Tyron Smith was a first round pick. Travis Frederick was a first round pick. But then you had like guys like Doug Free who weren't. Lyle Collins was like a late round pick. And then this Eagles O-line, Cam Jurgens is late. Jordan Mailata is late. Lane Johnson's the only first rounders. So like, yeah, and the whole thing about if you draft one, unlike other positions, like wide receiver, for example, Malik Neighbors this past year was a dog.
Yep.
There's not much else on that offense from John. And they drafted Malik Neighbors and they just plucked him here and said, hey, go be awesome. And he was awesome. The rest of it wasn't great, but like you could do that with wide receiver, with D-line, with whatever. Because even D-linemen, like you could basically
Brzee had a really good year. Our D-line was terrible.
You could filter situations for D linemen to be good. Like he doesn't like so-and-so is not good at playing the run. Okay, he's just not going to play on first and second down. Fine. So that's where like, but O-linemen, all 5 guys are playing all the time and they're only as good as the guy next to them. So it's just like, yeah, with the except like, the closest you can have is like Fuaga, left tackle's the closest thing that you have to an island where like, and Fuaga was great where we put him there. All right, you're left tackle, you're getting no help, go it. But like that doesn't happen too often. So
yeah, and if your left guard and center are poor, they'll just do a wide 9 on your left tackle, and then they'll run a DT stunt on your guard and your center, and the quarterback's going to have pressure in their face in under a second, and the play is dead. Oh wait, where did I see that in the Super Bowl? Oh, and also, right, in the Denver game against us, where the same pressure rate happened. And guess what? Bad quarterback play happened, which is why everybody keeps bringing up the O-line. It's the Green Bay game and the Denver game. And well, at some point, we'll get into the nitty-gritty. Like, well, here's what happened, and here's why, and here's how you adjust to it, because that'll be fun. Not today, because we're not going to make this a 2-hour show, because I'll go for fucking ever.
So quote number 3 from you.
So quote number 3, back on topic, Brian. Imagine working with me.
Yeah.
So this is to me the most interesting quote, like just from like the spill the tea, God, this guy's actually really good at this media thing. Like he's a lot better. Like you're like, oh, he doesn't interview well. I don't know. He handled this really, really well. So Kellen Moore said all of the former Saints players he talked to and people around the league say what a great place it is and what a great place to play and how much they loved it. And that is such a wonderful, beautiful political answer. So, first of all, here's how I know he's full of shit. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's on the team that he just won the Super Bowl with. Zach Bond's on the team that he just won the Super Bowl with. There were former Saints in Detroit. I don't know if there were any in San Diego. There were probably some in Dallas. And the reputation around the league is very well known. Now, here's the thing. Everything he said is true. All of those players, even Chauncey's shit-stirring ass, love the fans, love the city.
And the food.
And the food. Kellen just kind of glossed over that, well, the leadership is kind of jackasses and they're terrible and they don't really know what they're doing. And they make Zach Bond cry. And they traded CD for a bag of chips. For literally just doing the same thing every player in a contract year does, which is go pay me. Like literally, that's all that happened. Like that's the part that he's glossing over. And it's not, and I don't want to like rehash this into like, Mickey sucks. I made a 30-minute video on it. Y'all can go watch it. It's more of this is to me really tactical from him. Because when you're having these press conferences are not for the staff. They're a little bit for the team because it's a lot of the team members, it's their first time meeting their head coach. But it's mostly for the fans. And again, to a degree, the Derek Carr situation. You can't come out here the first time you see everybody and go, well, Mickey's an idiot. No one wanted to work with him, but I'm the only coach apparently who thinks they're good enough to offset this dumbass. You can't come out and say that the same way you can't just walk out and be like, well, Derek Carr is a bucket of butt. Did y'all see that play against the Giants? No one in the league wants that. Like, you can't do that, whether it's true or not, whether you believe it or not. I know some fans are delusional. They think he's like just under the Mahomes level or whatever. Like, it's irrelevant. You can't do that from a PR standpoint. But what you can do to endear yourself to the city is talk about the food and talk about the culture and talk about how much people love being here, which are real, true things. He's not making anything up. He's not blowing hot air. He's talking facts. All the players who have been here before have talked about, especially like the ones that like they get media coverage, have talked about how much they love being around the fans and how much they love the city and how much they enjoyed it. There were other football things they weren't as big of fans of. And Kellen being smart enough to say to the fans, hey, you guys aren't a laughingstock. People do love you. I do want to be here. I've heard from everyone I've talked to, it's a great place to be, and that's what I'm here. That gets you buy-in. And buy-in actually does matter. That dome being hell on earth for the opposition, well, it only exists that way if the fans are bought in and they believe. And sometimes to get people to believe, you got to feed them a little bit of bullshit. And so, like, I actually thought it was a really, really interesting quote just from the perspective of being really, really savvy with the media and being a lot smarter interviewing than people were talking about, again, just because he looks nerdy.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you summed it up well, so I won't add too much more. But like one thing I say, talking to Brian like offline and even in our Discord, I never understand how players come to New Orleans and have the fans hate them. Because whatever, like, yes, like you could play bad and stuff, but like the playbook is so goddamn easy to get us to like you. Like we as New Orleans, in my case, I'm from New Orleans, but Brian is a fan of New Orleans sports. Like we are such an easy people. Like, so the one I always bring up is Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis was like supposed to be the franchise, and he was not well liked here. Yeah. And I say that's what I say. I say just lie. Just lie. Like if you come into New Orleans and the first few things you say are, man, people are hospitable here. I love the food. I can't wait to try all the new restaurants. and the fans are great, especially the food one. You say the food one, we're idiots. I went to grad school, but I'm an idiot, and every time I hear the food one, I'm like, hell yeah, let's go. You know? But like, you know, when Derek Carr's like, I ate Chipotle, like it's like I appreciate
I
the
love
honesty,
that somebody in the room was like, by the way, piece of advice, don't say Chipotle.
don't, like, that's it. Like, and Kellen said in there, I think, like, you know, we can't wait to experience all the different restaurants here. We've already had a couple king cakes. He was there for a day. He probably has not had a couple, much less one king cake. Chances are, like, he doesn't even have to go to a restaurant the entire time, right? Rob Ryan was like a terrible defensive coordinator for us, but he was loved because he was out there just eating food. I mean, like,
Rob and Bacchus was like the greatest fucking thing ever.
Right. It becomes easy. And he's like an example of, like, you just have to say these things and we'll like you, even because he wasn't great. You don't have to be like good. And Anthony Davis was good, and we don't like him because he didn't embrace us. So anyway,
yeah.
So my last.
That's all, folks. Didn't resonate with the community. I'm shocked.
No, I don't think so. No, he didn't pick that shirt out. He said, "I don't pick my shirts out." Like, so the last quote.
His trainer either.
Yeah. The last quote I have, I think, is like probably the embodiment of Kellen Moore, what we can kind of expect from him as a coach. He said, so they kind of asked him about taking notes like throughout his career, and I have some funny DA quotes around that.
I can't wait.
So basically they asked him about taking notes, like, you know, over the course of your career, like, you know, you've picked up things you've been around basically like guys like Dan Quinn, Mike McCarthy, Jason Garrett, like all these coaches who have gone to the playoffs and whatever. So he's like, yeah, I've taken notes. And he basically said, I wasn't the tallest, biggest, fastest quarterback in the world. The only way I survived was I prepared as hard as I could, and that led me to the coaching side of things. Basically referring to his Boise State time. And like Brian prefaced in the beginning, guys, like, yes, he wasn't much of an NFL quarterback. Like his athleticism was lacking. Like he had a few starts, and you could just see that when the ball comes out, like he didn't have the God-given ability to survive in the NFL. That is why he didn't survive. He didn't survive because he's not smart enough to do this stuff. He didn't survive because like he had a popgun arm, but like he was one of the winningest quarterbacks at Boise State. He set records at Boise State. He might have been a Heisman finalist. I don't think he won.
He was. Like, no, I think he was a finalist.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also like immediately too, like freshman year, he was coming in, right? And so like I need to do that without God-given ability is impressive. And so I think that quote, like, of his self-awareness, like I wasn't the biggest, fastest, whatever. So he talked about like taking notes and like just constantly every interaction he had in the presser. He's talking about every interaction I have, I take something from this coach, and I think to myself, like, you know, because they asked him, like, do you think to yourself, like, when you're going to be a head coach? Because they said, before you became a head coach, did you picture what it was like going to be a head coach? And he's like, yeah, like I would take notes of how I would want to do this thing, how I'd want to do that thing. Like he was constantly thinking forward, and he took like actual physical notes. So like, you know, one can say like, oh, that's platitudes and stuff, like that's press conference talk. They actually asked DA in his press conference like about taking notes, you know, and so I love Cat Terrell. Like, so they asked him about taking notes, and he's like, yeah, taking notes to become like, you know, be a better coach and like whatever. And Cat Terrell asked, like, hey, so back when you said you were taking notes, like, were you doing like pencil to paper notes? Like, were you actually taking notes? And he was like, well, I mean, like, you know, you pick up things, but yeah, it's just like, it's like mainly mental notes. It's like, God damn it, dude. Like, and so that's where it's like
DA was me in class. And by the way, me in class is the exact example of what not to fucking do.
Yeah. It's just like,
my notes will not help anyone.
Yeah. I'm trying to find, there were like a couple other things that were just funny about like the whole notes thing. And like, okay. Yeah. So they asked him about the job interview. And this was, I think, the funniest quote I saw in there. They asked him about the job interview with Mickey, and they said, like, hey, what were like some of the like the tougher questions in the job interview with Mickey? And he's like, I honestly, you know, it was 6 hours. I don't really remember many of the questions. That's fair. I don't blame you. Like, it's a whirlwind, so that's fine. But he said, generally, the more abstract the question, the more difficult the answer, while the more concrete the question, the easier the answer. So I would say probably the more philosophical stuff was more difficult. But again, and he said, but again, I don't remember a whole lot. And it's like, yo, like being a head coach is like the most abstract position out there. And you just said, like, all that. And it's just like, it was just crazy to me where it was that, but like, yeah, it's just, oh my God, that is 20 minutes of my life I'm not going to get back
Absolutely.
listening to Dennis Allen do that. But like,
yeah,
the fact that he's like taking mental notes, where like Kellen is out here is like, no, I'm taking all these notes. And part of that, I will say, part of that is Kellen is an offensive coach and a former quarterback. Like that is habits built up over time, right? So, and here's the other last one. Because they asked Kellen in the thing where like, what do you picture being a head coach? Like, and he's like, yeah, I would do this and that. So they asked Dennis similar, like, did you ever picture being a head coach, and whatnot, like while you were defensive coordinator? He said, basically, I'm a guy who likes to just be in the here and now. I was just concerned about being a defensive coordinator, which is a fair answer, but also like, you just became a head coach and you just said like, I didn't really think about that. Between that and I just took like mental notes, and like throughout the press conference, they asked him what he learned from Sean. And there was like the most concrete answer he gave about what he learned from Sean was be me, just be me out there. But he didn't say anything about discipline, about systems, whatever. But yeah, but maybe we can pivot. I'll say more. We can pivot to like our general thoughts around everything, and yeah, I'll let you go, and then
absolutely. And actually, the DA quotes kind of reminded me of something. I'm gonna bring this to my work life here for half a second. So, I'd say for those who don't know, but no one knows, Bijon and I both work in tech, but in different sides of things. So I've worked in Silicon Valley startups, and I work in a company now that doesn't operate on the gifts provided by others, which is a very different way of doing business. Dennis Allen reminds me a lot of several CEOs I've met in the past, and I don't mean this as a compliment. Great at superlatives, great at platitudes, great at trying to present the facade of competence, but not having the process, the work ethic, or the drive to actually get the results. And that's very much the stereotype of the region, because there's some amazing companies and some incredible people out here that do a lot of great work. And there's some hacky, grifty bums that are really good at convincing people with a lot of money to give them some of that money to try to do things they have no idea whatsoever how to do. And that's really where Dennis Allen is. Kellen Moore is more of the guy that starts with a small business. You can use the restaurant example. Opens up a place, gets it going, adds a food truck, gets the name out there, builds a brand. And then you look back on it 5 years later, it's like, oh, wow, that guy's got 12 restaurants and 3 homes and a boat. How'd that happen? He just makes burgers. Yeah, because he's got 12 restaurants making thousands of burgers, and the margins, and like, and by the way, restaurants is a low margin business for anybody who wants to know about that. Like, that's how you make money, by putting in the work, but doing it intelligently. One thing that does drive me nuts about just, sports meetings, you're like, oh, that guy's a grinder. Okay. But like, and look, work ethic is important and it's always valuable, but are you working with intent? Because I met a lot of people that work really, really, really hard. And
Dennis Allen was leaving at 5, though.
The effort they do and produce twice as much because I work intelligently. It's not that hard work doesn't have value. Hard work always has value, but hard work without purpose and without direction. You ever seen a Roomba? When that Roomba hits an object and it just keeps hitting it over and over, the Roomba's working hard, y'all. It ain't cleaning the room. And that was Dennis Allen. Like, I'm not going to come out and say Dennis Allen was lazy, because I don't know that. What we can very clearly say is he wasn't working with intent, and he wasn't working with clear vision or focus. And it is super early. Literally, it's like the first week. of having Kellen Moore, but just going from these quotes and how he frames his vision of the job and how he frames how he sees his role within that architecture. Kellen understands when you're the head coach, you're the head of the organization. Your number one job is, to your point, to answer the philosophical questions first. If you don't know how to deal with a particular coverage, if you're not an expert on a particular position group, that's why you have people underneath you that are experts. But if you do not have a holistic view and understanding of where we're trying to go, how we're trying to get there, how do we put people in positions to succeed, etc., you won't. You will just be a Roomba running into a door.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well said. I mean, like, listen, I think Kellen, again, I'm bringing up the DA quotes not to bash DA. That's just happening.
That's me. I'm bashing DA. Yeah.
Right. But I bring up the DA quotes because, like we said, intro pressers are kind of platitudes. It's a lot of empty sentences, but like you can compare, and so like I'm just reading quotes. Like, I can go back and we can do the minute marker. So if you think I'm not giving him a fair shake, go back and watch it like a sicko like I was, But like I think one thing that I was kind of doing like a mental word cloud with Kellen of like, what are like the words that just kept coming up? Like lots of things about like growth, learning, work. Like he constantly talked about, leaning on other people and like learning from other people. He wants all perspectives in the room and whatnot. And then I think they even asked him like, this is another DA Kellen comparison. They asked Kellen, what did you learn from your time? They said you were at the Cowboys for 8 years. Then you did 2 short stints with the Chargers, followed by the Eagles. What did you learn? And he said, I learned to get out of my comfort zone. I learned to be uncomfortable. I learned because I had to navigate and adapt because I was in Dallas for so long. He said that was the first thing that came out of his mouth was like, I had to do that, but like it was fun and I liked learning and seeing new perspectives and all that. DA was asked, like, what did you learn from the Oakland experience? Which is like a fair question. Like, whatever you want to say, how it went and stuff. They asked him
objectively and empirically awful.
Yeah, right. But they asked him twice about the Oakland experience. And I swear, this is what it was. He basically said the last opportunity was just different circumstances. That was it. It was just different circumstances. That's all he said. He didn't say anything about whatever. And then the other time he said, they asked him, he said it was a different experience, different circumstances. And he's like, I was a 39-year-old head coach. So I think he was saying I'm a 39-year-old head coach as in I was young back then trying to do this. And they asked him what's different now. He said, I'm more experienced than I've been before, which happens just from living and being alive. But like he complained about, he like cited being 39 as a liability, but like Kellen embraced being 36 years old and doing this, and being young and starting at 31. So it's like you see these things like I said, does it mean anything? Probably not, but like it is telling, right? Because like we could be here 2 years from now and it turns out Kellen went 5 wins each time.
But at least the process is.
But yeah, the process you hear
that
it,
we can see.
Growth. Yeah, you can see it. You could see his excitement around learning, and that's usually the best coaches. Tomlin, Belichick, Sean, Reed, all those guys. Yeah, whatever, X's and O's, like they're probably dudes who have better X's and O's than those guys, really, at this point in their careers. But they're all such aggressive learners. Like that is like what the mark of a good coach, of like what is going to be the next thing, And because like being a quarterback, you naturally kind of think that way, and offense, you naturally kind of think that way. But you could tell like he likes this shit. And I think Lane Johnson said that the All-Pro right tackle for the Eagles, they asked him about Kellen Moore, and he said Kellen Moore is a great football mind, and he's basically a football genius. That's what he said about him. And they told Kellen that in the presser, and Kellen's like, I just try to go out there and learn and da-da-da-da. But like and Lane Johnson's not the only guy who's sung his praises. Like, there are a bunch of people saying basically he's a football genius, kind of like whatever. I think during the search, I was telling Brian, like, I just want a sicko. Like, I don't want a dude that I can get a beer with. Like, I want a sicko who just is obsessed. And that is one thing.
Both,
he is
they
obsessed.
Gotta be a sicko.
Yeah, like, exactly. Like, I don't need to get a beer with Kellen Moore, but one thing I can tell, like, he loves the game, and he sounds obsessed with this shit, you know? And listen, you do that, like, we'll see how the rest falls as far as players and stuff, but like, I don't think this dude is going to be scared. Like, I think, like, no. You know, he's going to, like, if he got hit with all the injuries last year, I don't think he comes out and is like, oh, you know, we got hurt or whatever. No, he's just going to, like, fucking ride, you know? So I'm excited about it. And I do think it's like a big shift away from what Dennis Allen was, you know? So thank God. And now from here on out, I'm not saying Dennis Allen's name again on any pods, you know, that I do with Brian anymore. So
yeah. And really, like, while bashing him is, like, I like to be a hater. I'm a certified hater. I also like to celebrate. Like, I celebrate the good things, but I celebrate my right to shit on the bad. Really, in either case, it's a celebration for me. I'm weird, but, like, really,
I'm a hater
honestly,
too, by the way. I just want to put that out there.
Don't get him started on Steph, y'all. all the DA stuff. Really, it just serves as a comparison point. It's less about shitting on DA, as fun as that may be. What this really is about is this is the last head coach we had. So it's obviously the most recent and most direct comparison. But it's also, we empirically know for fact that DA is a terrible head coach. It is not a mystery. It's not a could be. It's not a might be. It is a, nah, he sucks. And that's valuable in this circumstance as a comparison point, not to specifically shit on DA, but we had a great example of what not a good coach and what not a good process looks like.
And sounds like.
Seeing 100%. So seeing the new guy come in and not be following those same paths, not be making the same mistakes, not be going, well, we didn't win a game without Derek Carr, and saying dumb shit like that, where I would like to have a coach, again, whether you like Derek Carr or not, but you want a coach that comes out and actually acknowledges the context of the situation around the organization, or acknowledges that context exists and absolutely neos that shit and dodges the question. Those are your two options. Because when you just make a declarative statement and you say dumb shit, you not only open yourself up to ridicule from, you know, because it's a fan base, short for fanatic, there's going to be people with different viewpoints, but it's within the organization and within the locker room. Because I can tell you this, both from people we both know who've reported, but also, like, even national reporters have been all over this. There is not unison of thought within the Saints organization about this team, where they stand, where they are within the league, who the starting quarterback should be. A lot of these things are not necessarily uniform. And understanding how to navigate those waters publicly is a skill, and it is an aspect of leadership. So our last head coach was a Peter Principle head coach. Our interim head coach, I believe, was a Peter Principle head coach, why I was glad that we didn't hire him. I wish the roofer the best. This guy seems to understand the intricacies of leadership, that it is both the public and the unseen aspects of leadership that actually lead to results. And by the way, Mickey, when you look beyond the results, what that expression that you got out of a self-help book means is you're looking for how you got to the results, and so how to reproduce the good ones and how to fix the bad ones, not so you could ignore the stuff you don't like, you freaking helicopter parent of a D student.
Jesus. Yeah, no, I mean, like, by the
way, this is filtered, Brian.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, yeah, totally agree. I mean, like, and I think because of the package that Kellen Moore comes in, which is like kind of this 6 feet, he doesn't look like a former football player. He doesn't sound like a former football player. Like, people take his navigating maybe as him being a pushover or something, you know, or just like weak. But like, he's like nice, like, yeah, like he's probably not gonna swing on anybody. But he's done two things with that basically show me this dude is not a pushover. He said, I am not doing this if Derek Carr is there. That has been reported, corroborated in some fashion somewhere. I'm not taking the head coach if Derek Carr is there. That's like Mickey's guy, right? And to say that in the face when there's only one head coaching vacancy like left, it's not like Kellen Moore could have gone and interviewed elsewhere. Like this is all that was left. So if Kellen wanted to be a head coach, and a lot of national people have said this was Kellen's probably last chance. Like if Kellen didn't get it in this cycle, there was a good chance like
the stigma is going to land
this was
on you, and now it's going to be 10 times harder.
Yeah, it's going to be 10 times harder, and just like because he's been trying to get a head coaching job for years at this point, and it's the NFL. At a certain point, if you keep interviewing and you don't get a head coaching job, like that gets around, right? And then they're going to be like, okay, there must be something wrong. That's what happened to Eric Bieniemy with the Chiefs. Like there might be something wrong with him, but like he interviewed at so many places and didn't get jobs, so like it became a kind of a pervasive thing that maybe this guy isn't meant to be a head coach. So this was Kellen's last shot at getting a head coach theoretically, and to say that in Mickey's face and like basically stand on business, man. Like he stood on business, like with that. I like that. And that's all you can ask for with the whole thing you were talking about. Like there's no unison of thought in the building right now. That sucks. Like, you know, that needs to get changed. But one thing, you know, that Kellen is not going to be, he's not going to be a puppet. So it might blow up in his face and like Mickey gets tired of him and he gets fired next year because Kellen hurt my feelings. That might happen. But you know, Kellen's going to stand on his part. And that's the first step to getting that unison of thought. Because part of the reason that the unison of thought of that not being there is everybody is so soft on their whatever. Everybody has their own agendas. Like, you know, like, but Kellen wants to win games, and Kellen wants to win games, and he's going to stand on it. So I'm excited to see what he's like. But that's like pretty much mostly what I got. So
no, absolutely. No, same here. And I think this was obviously, we had fun. We hope you guys had fun. Everybody who made it all the way through. If you want to do a favor, do all those YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe. Especially the commenting. Not only does it help more people see the channel, but we love feedback. We love the back and forth.
Yeah,
and
do racial slurs if you want. Like it's all the same.
I mean, go for it. I like Ritz. You can call me a cracker. I don't care. They're delicious. Ritz and cheese. Don't give a shit. Because you obviously Bijon. Like, of course, I'm going to be the target.
Sure. Yeah.
America doesn't have any of these problems.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Different pod.
Choking on the bullshit. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll have more content coming your way soon.